Hey guys, how you going? This is BillyEatWorld, and today we're going to take a look at what gamers want in AAA FPS games. The last 2 years have seen some interesting new additions to the FPS genre, but sadly many of these games were underwhelming or just downright disappointing. On the other hand, if you take a look at the stats of total online players on Steam, it's obvious that older games like CSGO and Team Fortress are still at the head of the pack. So what makes these games so fun to play, and why are so many people choosing to stick with them rather than buy any of the new big budget games that have recently come out? To start with, I should point out that I'm not really a huge fan of either CSGO or Team Fortress, but I am a big fan of Insurgency, which is another game built on the Source engine. Compared to BF4, COD or Destiny, all of these games are nowhere near as visually impressive, and they run on an engine which is now over 10 years old. Regardless of this though, very rarely do these games attract as much criticism as many of the big budget franchises. CSGO in particular is obviously doing something right because it's consistently number 2 on the Steam charts with more online players than the last 3 Battlefield games combined. I think the popularity and the reputation of these games has got a lot to do with the fact they're a no-frills experience and they focus on the core gameplay mechanics. For years, the AAA FPS franchises have been adding in more and more features, and the end result usually ends up being a bloated product with a laundry list of balancing problems. I mean, for example, features like supers in Destiny or the exo mechanics in Advanced Warfare all seem like great ideas, but they do take away from what most players look for in an FPS game. Head-to-head gunfights are the most important thing in an FPS game, and when new features make this aspect of the game less satisfying, people start to lose interest. Now, there's literally hundreds of things that make or break an FPS game, but I think there's 4 main problems with games today, the most obvious being weapon balance. Devs need to make sure games are balanced from day one, and any changes that do need to be made need to come as quickly as possible. I think everyone is aware the issues BF Hardline has been having over the last month or so, and even Advanced Warfare suffered from day one balancing issues. There's no point having a huge weapon list if half of the weapons aren't worth using, so hopefully the devs take this into consideration for future games. That brings me to my next point, which is on bloating, and I think the Battlefield series in particular has suffered a lot from this. Every feature that gets added into a game has the potential to add value, but if the devs don't have time to support the features they add, then it's just a waste of time and resources. I mean, just take a look at how many game modes are available in BF4 that rarely get played, representing hundreds of hours of development time that could have been spent elsewhere. I don't think innovation is a bad thing, but I think there can be such thing as too much innovation, and the sooner the devs realise this, the better. Now, the next problem that's starting to work its way into a lot of franchises is verticality, which obviously takes away from the core head-to-head gunfights. A certain degree of verticality isn't a problem like windows in a building, but pretty much every big FPS franchise these days has added in more vertical levels and some kind of double jump ability. The biggest issue with allowing players to access higher levels is that some players will camp them just so that they can easily farm kills from unexpecting players below. Some people might think this makes FPS games more tactical, but personally I just find it frustrating, and I really don't think any recent AAA FPS game has done verticality well. And finally, the last thing I think developers have really got to work on is connection, because this is what usually gets criticised the most, and it's usually the hardest thing to fix. I think a big part of the reason CSGO and the other games I mentioned before are so popular is because the connection in these games feels way more solid than most recent FPS games. I think we all know about the connection issues Battlefield has dealt with in the last few years, but Advanced Warfare was another example of innovation ruining connectivity. The devs added skill-based matchmaking into this game, which would have been a great feature if it didn't lead to matchups with players in other regions. Now, this is by no means a complete list of all of the reasons AAA games have been less successful than they should have been. Some did okay and some completely flopped, but I think it's safe to say none have really ended up being a breakthrough success like CSGO was. It's pretty hard to make a bad game when you throw a few $100 million at it, but it seems like every time a new game comes out, we end up talking about these same problems. I just feel like if the devs focused on getting these things right at launch, rather than trying to patch them later, it'd end up better for their sales as well as our overall experience. But anyway guys, that just about wraps up this video, so let me know what you think, and as always, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Also, check out the links in the description below if you want to see more of my videos, or if you'd like to support my channel on Patreon. And until next time, see you later, and have a good one.